Hi guys, Togre here with a new video, and this video will be my RBG prediction video for Dragonflight. It will be a tier list based on design and kit. Of course, the numbers are still on right now, but they might still change it with the coming up patch notes for the PTR, beta, and even for the coming out of the season 1 of Dragonflight. So everything is still ever changing. This is a prediction video. I will make a final video once we have more changes coming in, but we can already base our tier list with the designs and if specs are going to be more valuable than others going into Dragonflight, right? So we have S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier. S tier means that it is like a god tier spec. It will be valuable for RBGs in general, and every RBG group might want a S tier spec in their comp. A tier spec is a meta spec, so they are good for pretty much every RBG group, but will be more specific for either melee cleaves or caster cleaves, or that spec is like a jack of all trades, so can be played with everyone. B tier means that it is actual average. It will not be highly valuable except for some maps, except for some situations. But as you know, in RPGs, you don't really choose your maps. It could be a flag map, it could be a node map, it could be anything really. And you don't want to randomly make a group and hope that that map is going to drop. Of course, every spec, and I'm going to reiterate, every spec is playable in RPGs. I think just with a tier list you can have differences of valuable specs between each other, but I think like any spec can be valuable to their own rights. Of course, I think classes and specs that are going to be good on every map are going to be more valuable than some specs that are good on certain maps, and you will see with the classifications of those specs into my tier list. The C tiers means that they are actually underpowered. I don't think it will be a question about pure damage and damage meters, but I think it's also about the kit. If it's a kit is purely about damage, if it's purely about healing, but no utility or no valuable assets to the group, it might end up in C tier. It doesn't mean that it's bad overall, and that you're not having to like play that spec or class, but if you want to be valuable for the RBG groups in general, I would suggest to go for P, A, and even an S tier spec. The D tiers are, I would say, maybe unplayable at that point. You should maybe reconsider playing that spec if you want to be doing a lot of RBGs. Of course, I think with a lot of design choices they made for Dragonflight, I feel like there is like a few specs that are like underplayed, like underappreciated, I would say, and they might end up on D tier, but most specs are probably C and above. Now, if you want to check those specs individually, there will be start timestamps with those specs cited, and then we can go even further and beyond. That intro was quite long, but I wanted to explain my tier list to as many people as they can, because not everyone is subscribed. So if you want to subscribe to the channel, be sure to do that, and you will see loads of content Dragonflight wise. All right, so now let's talk about the Blood DK. Blood DK is the first spec of that tier list, and I feel like it is one of those specs that are very, very precise into playing to be annoying for the enemy team. I think damage wise it is not great. I think utility wise it is alright. Like defensives wise, I feel like you're still going to drop depending on numbers, of course, because they could buff self-healing for some reason. But I feel like there is like one thing that they are good, and it is hostaging a healer. So they could grip, slow, grip again, slow again, stun, blind, grip again, and that healer will not play the game. So basically, you will make a game 9 versus 9. Now, is it valuable to have that in your team? I don't know. So for me, it's a D tier spec. Um, Unfortunately, because I love Blood DK like since Warlock, since Wrath of the Lich King, and it's just annoying that how they are pushing the Blood DKs into that PvE mode where they are self-healing themselves too much, where they have to actually nerf that aspect in PvP because it can't stand. I wish they did like some PvP modifiers to make it more interesting to play Blood DK, more damage wise. I think because utility it is alright, but I mean, in RBGs, I feel like a Blood Decay is not as valuable as the other classes and specs. Frost Decay is easily the most S tier specs for melees. Of course, it could change, I think, numbers wise, but it has huge cleave potential, and that cleave makes it very, very valuable for RBGs. In general, you want to stun loads of targets, and Frost Decays can do that with two talents, with the talent with the Frostworm, or they go for the PvP talent, and or you can take both and stun with your winter AoE. And with those stacks, you could really stun a lot of melees, and those melees will be probably going to die if they are stunned for too long. And I'm actually going to probably main Frost DK because I'm maining DK for sure. But I think Frost DK is probably my main spec of that, and I'm looking forward for RPGs with that spec. Unholy DK is a great spec, but I feel like in RPGs it is not as valuable. I would say it's B tier because they lack the AoE stuns. They have the damage. They could AoE rot, especially with a build that they could go for where you're going to apply a lot of diseases and you're going to rot the enemy team. Now, depending on the meta, I think burst will still be the main goal for any team if they are going team versus team. RBGs are notoriously good for bursty classes, especially classes that can burst a lot and often. Look at balanced druids in Shadowlands, where they went for convoke, and you had like 2 or 3 balanced druids actually convoking on your team, and you couldn't stop for some reason. You would just die because of a star surge. They didn't really go for, or they could actually go for a starfall build, but that's more for low MMR. At higher MMR, you try to play around convoke. I think Unholy DK, they will just lack the AoE stuns and the AoE CC that it could provide with, let's say, a Frost DK. Now, Blind is now available for all DKs, so that is something that is going to be usable and also useful for the whole team in general. But that's why for me it's a B tier. It's not bad. It just depends about the comps for real. They have loads of damage. That's why it deserves a B spot and not C spot. But I think if you need to classify Frost DK as S tier, you need to put a tier between Frost DK and Unholy DK to actually classify the Unholy DK. Well, that's my opinion, of course. Alright, Havoc Demon Hunter. I think Havoc Demon Hunter with current utility kit numbers, whatever, it is a A tier spec in RBGs. It could easily be a S tier, but I just feel like DHs, or at least Havoc Demon Hunter, is just too cornered into a specific RBG comp. It cannot be played in every comp because I feel like Carsicleaves don't really need a Demon Hunter, or at least a Havoc Demon Hunter. I think they are more they are going to appreciate a bit more Frosty case with their Grips, DCC, and in general their anti-magic zone and also anti-magic shell to actually survive the magical damages, right? Demon Hunters also have that, but I feel like it's more selfish. And as besides the damage, I feel like the Frost decays are just more like good in general, damage wise, utility wise, defensive wise, everything wise. But you will see Havoc Demon to really shine on flag maps where they can just chase the flag carrier more easily than, let's say, a Frost decay. So that's why for me it's a meta. It could easily be S tier depending on the guy that is actually speaking in the video. But for me it's a A tier spec, and of course in arenas it will be different. But in RPGs for me it's a A tier spec. Alright, Vengeance Demon Hunter. I feel like with the nerfs of Guardian Druid, which we are going to discuss about Guardian Druid real soon, I feel like Vengeance Demon Hunter is going to make a comeback. They also have crazy design. They have a lot of like control, a lot of self peel, self defense. Is going to be very valuable for any RBG group playing on flag maps. Now, I don't know if it's going to be very meta depending on the situations. I feel like Guardian Druid, even though they're nerfed, they don't have like the sleeper legendary now. They have that as a talent, but it is only like a damage boost, basically. Um, Vengeance Demon Hunter, he don't have stealth, and Guardian Druids have stealth, so that's a big like advantage that a Guardian Druid has on a Vengeance Demon Hunter. But I think Vengeance Demon Hunter has crazy mobility, and they don't sacrifice any mobility by just being a tank. While a Guardian Druid, if they want to have huge mobility, they will have to go cat form, travel form, whatever form they can do to actually go faster. And eventually, Demon Hunter is going to be very good. So I think it's going to be meta. It's going to be A tier. I don't know if it's going to be S tier, depending on the numbers, right? But my prediction is the Vengeance Demon Hunter is going to kind of take a bit of a spotlight compared with Guardian Druids in Shadowlands, where basically you play with a Guardian Druid or you lose. Now you have more choices. I feel like it's better for the game in general, at least PvP wise. Balance Druids, notoriously S tier because it has huge cleave potential with Starfall builds, but you also can go for Star Surge builds, and in general, they have good CC, which is not breakable. Like for example, Cyclone. You have good mobility. You have stealth, so you can also just do a surprise attack whenever you can. And in general, it is just a valuable asset to have in your RBG groups. That doesn't even matter if it's a melee cleave or a class cleave or even just a mixed match of everything, right? Feral Druids, now they are buffed. I just don't want to pronounce too hard on it. I want it to be meta, but notoriously RBGs just are kinda discriminating ferals in general because they feel like why take a feral if you can take a rogue? Basically, it's kind of the same, and the feral can't really vanish as like a rogue could do. They don't have cloak, so they cannot really run away from dot damage or whatever. So for me, I'm going to speak with my heart. For me, it's an 8-year spec, but I think it's very precise. You really want to be in a melee cleave because I feel like you're going to be very valuable on certain maps where you could stealth cap some nodes, where rogues will not be able to like ghost a node because they know there is still feral druids that can always go for the flag, and if you're not there, then the flag is lost, right? So that's the pressure that a feral druid can apply to any group. Feral Druids could be also a very good flag carrier because you can go for a Heart of the Wild build that is going to focus on the Guardian aspect, so you will have huge defensives, but I don't know if it's going to be valuable to actually stay in Guardian, like in better form to actually survive the damage. So we will see if it's going to be any meta. For me, Feral Druids, they are fantastic. They do a lot of damage, they have a lot of bleeds, they cannot be purged really easily, except if you're a dwarf or now Evoker that can cauterize a bleed or bleed effects. But I feel like Feral Druids, it depends upon numbers. If the numbers are good, it is valuable to get it. If the numbers are bad, then it's going to be very difficult. Now, Guardian Druid, I think it's still going to be the very best tank out there, but it will not be a lose or win situation if you don't get a Guardian Druid. I think it's still meta for the reason that they have stealth, so they can easily go to the enemy base without being noticed, and also they are very good node defenders because again stealth, so they cannot get sapped at like easily, I would say. um, and that's a very valuable thing because anyone that is going to node defend and you get sapped, basically you will have to trinket that sap or else that node is going to get capped. So there is a bit of a problem there, and Guardian Druids can really circumvent that problem, and they are actually the only class that can do that, at least tank wise. So for me, it's still S tier, but the gap is narrowing, so it means that you will have a lot easier over time to actually find tanks in RBGs, at least Vengeance Demon Hunter, but I could also talk about Protection Warriors in general. Alright, Resto Druid. I think Resto Druid is a fantastic class. It is going to be S tier for me. There is like a few classes that are going to be S tier, at least healing wise for RBGs. I'm going to say A tier, excuse me. It's going to be A tier because I'm thinking there's a lot of other healers I'm going to put on S tier, and you need to have some separation. It's still meta. I think healers are going to be very good in RPGs in general, in like RPGs in general, so you will still have a spot anyways. But if you want to have fun, if you want to have like be a very mobile healer that puts a lot of hots on everyone, and that is going to be very like valuable on flag maps, node maps, maps where you need to be very mobile, I think Resto Druids is going to be very valuable. So for me, it's going to be a meta spec. Devastation Evoker. Now, the problem is we don't have enough data from previous expansions because it didn't exist. And in general, we can only judge by the kit. I think kit-wise, they have a lot of damage, a lot of burst, depending on numbers again. They have somewhat of a CC, but they need to commit like a lot. They also need to be very, very close to do somewhat of a good amounts of damage, which is going to be punished by Affliction Warlocks, Boomies, even melees. So I feel like it's going to be very close to C tier, but I'm going to put it in B tier because we don't really know. We don't have enough information about that. I think damage alone is not a criteria I can like value, especially since their second spec is so much better, and you only need really one evoker to have the most optimal RBG group. And for me, preservation is probably the most S tier spec out there, at least healer wise. It has so much AoE healing, so much utility, so much mobility, and also you can create mobility to other classes, like for example Frost Decays, to pull them away from danger. It makes it a lot more valuable to play. And I feel like you need a preservation like evoker in your group. And if I could make a S plus tier, I could do that, but I'm not going to do that. They would be in S plus, but I'm going to put them as first on the most left spec out there. And for me, preservation evoker is on another level, and you should also be wary about that. They have a like a rate buff, basically giving a lot CDR, like cooldown reduction on mobility spells, and that alone is so big on RPGs because again, an RPG group, an RPG match has a certain duration, which makes it very valuable for mobility spells to be spammed. And the more you spam, the more valuable you get, value you get from that buff. So in arenas, you could have somewhat of a value, but in RPGs, you spam so many spells, at least mobility wise, that you will have a lot more value and you will win minutes instead of seconds. So preservation, evoker, S plus. BM Hunter. So for me, BM Hunter is just one of those hunters that is reliable, like relying on pet damage, and pets are actually like killable. And for me, just because of that aspect, it is a C tier spec. Unfortunately, I feel like the addition of Diamond Eyes, which is the PvP talent that makes your freezing traps not break on damage, super valuable because again, if your traps are not breaking, you are more valued in team fights. But your pets just die, flop over to any AoE damage. Although they are like passively more resistant to AoE, they still just die because someone tap targets to the pet and the pet just flips over, right? So they also have a lot of consistent damage, not a lot of burst damage. They could have burst damage, but it is also tied to their pet. So if their pet is dying, then burst damage is gone. So for me, it's C tier. Of course, it could change, but it means it is not very valuable. You could still play BM Hunter. You can make your own groups, but other specs might be just more valuable, right? Survivor Hunter, I would say it's kind of the same. Um, it has a build where you could play like a lot less reliably around pets, but I'm still going to put it in C tier because they do still have a lot of problems. Like if they don't have a pet, you will lose a lot of focus, and now that you need a lot of focus to do a lot of damage, it becomes a bit problematic. And that is the difference with, for example, marksmanship hunter. Marksmanship hunter is a tier spec in my opinion. It doesn't really change since Shadowlands. I think Shadowlands marksmanship hunter is one of those specs that are super like undervalued while they are super valuable. They have a diamond eyes now, so you could play with traps that are not going to be like broken after a AoE attack, which is super good in RBG groups, because against Cyclone is very good. So is Diamond Trap, Diamond Ice Trap, whatever. They have a lot of burst damage. They are valuable because they have a lot of range. They have a lot of one shot capacity, but also a lot of consistent damage. And I feel like just because of that, Hunter could just be valuable for any group. So it will be good for melee cleaves, it will be good for caster cleaves, it will be good for mixed cleaves. In general, I think Hunter is just one of those specs that are going to be maybe not as valued for the community, but once you face a good hunter that is going to obliterate you, you will then understand that hunter is more than just a node sitter. Because please don't make your hunter sit a node, because that's a lost opportunity just for damage at least. Arcane Mage is, for me, a bit more valuable than in Shadowlands. It has great damage. You CC wise is going to be always difficult depending on maps. Like for example, Eye of the Storm, a polymorph is going to be broken in 1, 2, 3. But the good thing is it's a great node sitter because you have mass invis, you have your PvP talents, you have invisibility, of course. In general, you have loads of damage with your arcane missiles, arcane barrage. I think arcanes are going to be very happy with Dragonflight in general. I'm going to talk about arenas also very shortly, but in RBGs, I think arcanes are going to be better than previously. So for me, it becomes a B tier instead of a C or D tier. But be wary, mages are very hard to play in RBGs because you don't really have a great polymorph like CC ability where you are reliably CCing someone. People are still going to break it, but you get Ice Wall as arcane, also as fire, and that's a very big CD that you can also use to cut off the healers, which makes it a lot easier to kill those DPSs. So for me, it's a B tier. Fire Mage is going to be C tier because I don't have enough data about the most casting design build. I do love to cast a lot of spells, but is it even possible in RBGs because they are going to focus you? You can play around Combust, but the problem is with Combust is it is too CD reliant. It can get purged as well. It can be stopped with CC because you cannot break every CC with your blink, right? Um, in general, if you don't have a combust with your combust design spec, you're not going to do a lot of damage. And if you need to cast a lot because of your design choices on your talent trees and you are not being able to actually cast, it is going to be also problematic. So for me, it's going to be a C tier spec. Alright, Frost Mages. I think it's going to be a B tier spec like Arcane. Slows, very valuable. I think in general, Frost mages are going to be better than Arcane in Devastation because they have a lot of slows, they have good range, they have Ice Wall, which is easier to take. You have Frost Bomb, so you have a lot of AoE effects with your PvP talent. There is also a Frozen Orb build where you could do a lot of AoE pressure with your Blizzards as well. So you could play around that. I would not sit on a node with a Frost Mage because I feel like it's useless. You don't have a lot of defensive capacities like, let's say, Arcane Mage. But a Frost Mage is somewhat valuable. It is strong. It does a lot of damage, it does a lot of CC, but it is all breakable, and it is also counterable just by focusing the mage. But that's why it's B tier. It is alright. You're going to climb it if you are going to play it. Also, I would recommend to make your own groups so you can reliably invite people, but be wary, it's not the easiest class or spec to play in RBGs. Mistweaver monks, they are S tier. They have huge mobility, huge CDs, huge CCs. They have everything they need. They just lack damage. But maybe with the Zen pulse, it could be interesting. We'll see. With the amounts of enemies that you are targeting, it will also heal the target because of the enemies that are going to actually hit. So we will have to see if it's going to be very strong or not. But at least defensive wise, it is one of the best defensive healers out there. You have huge amounts of defensive capacities to actually make your target survive. You have also immunities, you have ports, you have the mobility to follow your target, you have the CC to actually stop the targets from reaching to a point. So in Ring of Peace, still very viable. So for me, it's a S tier spec. In general, it's very reliable, and I think it is going to be very fun to play with, and also against Mistweaver monks. Brewmaster, also the healing throughput is still very big. So in RBGs, everything is about throughput also, healing wise. If you're not healing a lot, then you're not valuable. If you are healing a lot, then it becomes very, very valuable. So Brewmaster monks, they have a problem where they are really compared to other classes, at least other tanks. And I don't know if it's going to be very, very good in RBG. To be frank, I don't see a lot of brewmasters, and the ones I see, they get decimated in 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to put it in C tier because aside of the obvious mobility that they have because they are monk, they don't really offer anything, I would say, valuable to the team. Um, Again, I think it's playable since they are not compared to Guardian Druids anymore. They still are going to be compared to a Guardian Druid, but at least Guardian Druid will lose their immunity, which makes other specs a bit more interesting to play with. But Brewmaster, I can't find any great points to actually point out to give Brewmaster a great spot to the B tier, A tier, or S tier spots. Windwalker, I think they are going to be B tier in RBGs. The only problem they have is they're going to die super quickly, and they need to be in the fray to do a lot of damage. So yeah, if you see a Windwalker, you just want to focus them because they don't have a lot of defensives. They're going to die and flop over really quickly. They do have some one-shot burst potential. That's why for me it's a B tier spec, because on certain maps where you have a lot of 1v1, 1v2, or 2v2 situations, a Windwalker can decimate the enemy team. But I think in big team fights, you're not going to exist. That's why for me it's a B tier spec. You can make it work in melee cleaves, but outside of that, I would not dare to play with a caster cleave because you will be the only one in the front line and you're going to get decimated by everyone. Holy Paladin. I think Holy Paladin in general is not a bad healer. I just think the design is not that great. But you have Sack, you have Pop, you have somewhat of a AoE healing capacity. It's very clunky to play though. Um, I'm going to put it in B tier because I think Resto Druid is just better than Holy Paladin, so I need to make some separation. It is playable. You're going to still have a lot of groups going for your Holy Paladin, but if you have a choice to make and you don't know what healer you would play, I would not suggest Holy Paladin. I also discuss Holy Paladin a bit more throughout in my Should You Main Paladins video for Dragonflight. So if you want to check it out, you can check that out, and we will discuss even more if you type a comment below the video. Protection Paladin. I think Protection Paladin is a B tier tank. It doesn't have a lot of mobility, but they have spells that they can actually use to advance further. You have like the PvP talent that makes everyone knocked back. whenever you use the Cavalier like talent. So you have somewhat of a mobility spell, I would say, but it is not the same as a leap or stealth or speed from a Guardian Druid, for example. Like, I think it's still a very valuable healer as well, because you can play Eye of the Storm with a Protection Paladin, and that Protection Paladin will not die at mid. So for the flag, you'll still have a lot of like fighting capacities, but you can also off heal really well. Your damage is not that bad as well. I think you have a lot of PvP capacities to exist. Um, and for sure, the nerf of Guardian Druids just made them a bit better. So for me, previously they were like C tier, I think, and now they're just B tier because again, Guardian Druid got nerfed, so everything is going to shoot back to the top somewhat. Like for example, for me, Brewmaster was a D tier spec with Blood Decay. Retribution Paladin, I think Retribution Paladin are going to be still A tier, very close to S tier. Um, it's going to be very good in melee cleaves where you have a warrior or frost decay or whatever to actually protect the paladin. But the paladin itself is going to be a one-shot machine. So if they are going to touch the target is going to die really quickly. I think it's still going to be very difficult to play because you're going to still die very quickly because you don't have a wall. But I think having Retribution Paladin is a valuable thing. You can play Reckoning Aura, so basically you're going to have wings all the time. Um, and yeah, I think it's going to be as good as Shadowlands, if not better. So we will see if it's going to be better based on numbers. Disc Priest is going to be my third S tier healer. I'm watching, like, I think Preservation being the top is normal. Then having Mistweaver and Disc Priest at the same level is for me something that is going to be a truth, at least for 99% of the players, because they have a lot of AoE healing, they have atonement healing, they have also a lot of damage, they have mind control, so you can basically make someone just not playing, I would say. You have fear, you have a lot of, like, again, damage, like I said, also a lot of utility. So for me, it's a S tier spec. Also in Dragonflight, also in Shadowlands, it was a S tier spec. So for me, a very valuable spec to play. Holy Priest. Now, I think it's the same as Holy Paladin. If you have a choice, I think you would play Disc Priest. They also suffer from the comparison with Disc Priest. The same as Unholy DK, if you put Disc Priest at S tier, you will have to separate a tier between Disc and Holy, and for me, that's why Holy Priest is a B tier spec. By themselves, they are alright, but they don't have a lot of AoE capacities, although they can spec for it, but it is still not made for that. They have a lot of damage, they have the same utility, at least CC wise, as the priest. They have a stun at least, but I think AoE wise, AoE healing, the healing throughput, Disc Priest wins this time, and also in Shadowlands they also won that for me. But I think if you want to play Holy Priest, you can do that, and you can also climb with it without any problems. Now let's talk about the A tier spec, which is Shadow. Shadow is going to be very valuable in Dragonflight. They have a lot of good things going on. They could now play about the instant damage build, which is something that is going to be probably better for RBGs. And dispel protection, very big, especially if you're playing with an Affliction Warlock. You can play a Shadow Cleave, I would say, build, a group, and it could be very fun to play. So I imagine like a fast TK with a balanced druid, affliction warlock, shadow priest, and then you have like a rogue to defend nodes, and then another melee, and you will have a fantastic group to play with. So for me, it's an 8 tier spec. Now, rogues is difficult to actually discuss because I think rogues in general they are S tier because you always need a rogue, but I will try to compare them with themselves because I can't compare a balanced druid with a rogue because it's not the same like role in a RPG match. But assassination rogues are for me A tier. They're going to be very, very strong, very valuable. at least in 1v1 situations. They are going to delete people, and that's what they are actually asked for if they are going to play on certain maps. If you're playing on a node map where you need to defend, you can ghost that node and go for like a aggressive play, but you will need to damage to do that. And I think Assassination Rogues is just one hell of a damage dealer, and that's why for me it's an A tier spec. I want to talk about the S tier spec first. I think Subtlety, although they are nerfed or they look nerfed for Dragonflight, number wise they're going to be buffed somehow, some way. And I think Subtlety Rogues are still going to be the king of RBGs because they have a lot of ways to run away, they have a lot of ways to like catch people, they have a lot of ways of CCing people. They can kill someone in a shadowy duel, they can kill someone in a smoke bomb. So for me, it's a S tier spec, um, just because they can be very valuable stealth wise. Outlaw rogues are going to be B tier. Again, I'm going to say that is a rank between themselves. If I need to say rogues are going to be S tier, I could say rogues are going to be S tier. But for me, I need to separate those classes between themselves. And outlaw rogues, they don't have the big burst potential that an assassination rogue or a subtlety rogue has. They also are not as stealthy as, let's say, a subtlety rogue, and for me, that's why it's a B tier spec because I have to compare themselves with each other, and I feel like assassination rogue is just a tad bit better than outlaw rogue, but as a subtlety rogue is just so much better between those two specs. So for me, that's why it's a S tier spec. Elemental Shaman. I think Elemental Shaman is going to be A tier. I know there's a lot of classes at A tier, S tier, but I think the design in Dragonflight is going to be very good for a lot of classes, and a lot of classes are going to be playable in Dragonflight. So Elemental Shaman, they have a lot of cleave damage, a lot of AoE damage, they have a lot of one-shot capacities, they have a lot of builds that can make you one-shot people, and just because of that, I think it's an 8 respect. They can knock people out, they can CC people with lasso, although it's very hard to actually pull it off because people will just CC you. You have Earthbind, you have Tremor Totem, you have Hex, which is more valuable than polymorph. So for me, just because of that, it's a 8 spec. I know a lot of people have a stigma for elemental shaman, so why would you play elemental shaman if you have a balanced druid? But I think they are very complementary. You can play elemental shaman in a group where you have an affliction warlock or balanced druid, and you can make it work. So for me, it's an elemental shaman show in Dragonflight, and you will see a lot more elemental shamans. But and if I think people will have to understand that elemental shamans are going to be somewhat valuable, right? Enhancement shaman. Enhancement shaman. It's a very difficult spec to actually rate because I do like elemental shaman, enhancement shaman. Um, I just don't know what role he can play. So for me, it's going to be B tier because it is going to be good because they have still a lot of valuable like CC and damage and off healing, but it has to take a spot. And in a 10v10 game, it becomes very hard to actually give everyone a spot. So that's why it's average because I think you will have to make your own groups if you want to play Enhancement Shaman, which is not bad because I make my own groups as well with all my characters. It does take time, but since they nerfed Guardian Druids, I think it's going to be a bit better, at least LFG wise. Enhancement Shaman is just very fun. But if you have to compare with a warrior or a DK or paladin or whatever, it becomes very hard to make it play. So that's why for me it's B tier. Although me myself, I would put it a bit higher, but I need to actually think about the design and the prediction about the meta. I feel like it's more of a B tier spec, at least RBG wise. Resto Shaman. I think it's a bit better than Holy Paladin, so I'm going to put it in A tier, but very low A tier. I think the only good thing about Resto Shaman is the amount of CDs and utility they have. Throughput wise, it is not better than Holy Paladin, but I think it's not only about throughput, because then I would say Holy Priest would be a bit higher. But they have mobility because they have Ghost Wolf, they have a lot of CC, a lot of disruption, they have somewhat of good damage, they have a Spirit League Totem that can save melees really quickly. Um, They could do also a bit of off damage, like I said, of DPS, but rest of the Druid is just that much better, right? And that's why there's a bit of separation. If I could put it in B plus, I would do that, but I just feel like it's better than Holy Paladin, like by a lot. So that's why for me it's going to be a 8 respec. They also have Lasso, Thunderstorm. They have a lot of utility, so that's why for me 8 tier is a good spot for Restoration Shaman. Now we have Warlocks and Warriors. I'm going to talk about Warlocks first. Warlock, like Affliction Warlock, is going to be S tier. I'm going to rate everything and then going to discuss about it. So Destruction Warlock is going to be for me A tier, and Demonology is going to be C tier. I'm going to explain why. Affliction Warlock, the damage is very easy to do. I would say easy to do, but it will be hard to perform because Affliction Warlock is just not the easiest spec to play. But in RBGs, you will have a lot of time to do a lot of AoE damage. There is an AoE build I'm going to discuss in the future once Dragonflight is going to come out, and it's going to be making your life a lot easier in RPGs. Yeah, it's going to be doing a lot of AoE damage, and I think everyone is going to play it that way. But I'm going to discuss it once I have a Affliction Warlock guide on my channel. So if you want to check it out, please subscribe to the channel. It's notoriously going to be very good because it has dispel protection, and that by itself is a very good thing. Destruction Warlock, they have great damage. I think they have a lot of one-shotty damage. They have the utility of an Affliction Warlock, but they have instants. They don't have the dispel protection, and that by itself makes it an A tier spec instead of a S tier spec, like for example Affliction Warlocks, because again, Affliction Warlocks makes them not being able to dispel, which is pretty massive in AoE fights, in group versus group fights. And in general, I think Affliction Warlocks are going to be self-sustained kings, and that's why it deserves S tier. Destruction deserves A tier, and then you have Demonology being a C tier. The same as BM and Survival, they are reliably very, very like bad in big group fights because they're demons. They're going to die very quickly. If they're summoning Felguard, the Felguard is going to go into the melee space and they're going to get obliterated. And from that point, it becomes very hard to do any significant damage. But also at that point, you get flip over by any other spec. If they're going to watch the Demonology being petless, they're going to die very quickly. So for me, it's going to be a C-tier spec. Although they have a lot of damage, they have the possibility to turn fights, but having a pet just makes it a C-tier spec, in my opinion. Arms Warrior. So I think the problem is with Arms Warrior is the numbers are not great for arms. It could change at any point. It could be better at like season 1, whenever it's going to come out. But I have to do a prediction based upon the number, like based on the kit and the design. I think warriors in general are not going to be bad. So I want to put it in A tier, but I want to say that's Retribution, Feral. So I think I'm going to put it in B tier because it doesn't have a lot of self sustain, although they have better self sustain than Shadowlands. I think all the classes have a bit more, and Arms Warrior they just need a lot more damage to compensate the actual state of Arms Warrior. They don't have a lot of self defensives, and just because of that, they are B tier. I think you can still make an Arms Warrior work in melee cleaves. If you play with a Frost DK, Retribution Paladin, Arms Warrior, Feral Druid, Stability Rogue, and then you put like let's say a Unholy DK or Enhancement Shaman, you can make it work, or a Double Warrior for example. But they lack something, and for me that something is defensive like purposefulness, I would say, into the RBG group. They don't have a lot of AoE utility, and for me, it decides a bit the tier list, I would say. Fury are going to be A tier because they have a lot of great damage compared to Arms Warriors. They have a lot of self healing too. You can say whatever you want, but Bloodthirst can't make you heal for a lot over a whole match. You can play a leech build even, where you can sustain yourself just by auto attacking. Um, I think it's a tough competition between Fury and Arms. I think if I could put a B plus tier, I would do that, but I'm not going to change the tier list for now. In general, I think Warriors are going to be valuable. They're going to be very good, but it has to play with a melee cleave. If you're not going to play melee cleave, I think Warriors are going to be a lot less viable. But casters are going to love you because you are the front line, and if they are not, like if they are in front line, it means that they are going to focus the warriors, which means that the casters are going to do a lot more damage overall in a whole match. Now protection warriors are going to be for me A tier. Since current druids, like I said, are going to get nerfed, they're going to be very much more valuable than, let's say, Shadowlands. They also have the Leaper legendary, I would say, baked into the talent. Now I need to see if it's going to be usable or not, because sometimes they are nerfing the class for PvP. Let's say you cannot leap multiple times with the flag. In normal BGs you can do that, but in RBGs you can't for some reason. If they fix that, I think it's going to be very good. If they don't, then it will be just a second DPS. So you will have a tank that is going to do some good one-shot capacities, but that's it. And we will have to see in the future if protection warriors are going to be sustainable in the future. So this is my tier list. It has been a while I didn't make a tier list, and now I wanted to make a tier list for that. So if you want to see real quickly, it is like this, with blood decay being D tier. In general, I think I'm somewhat happy with that tier list. Preservation Evoker is just that much better. Guardian Druids still nerfed, but they have stealth abilities, so it's still going to be very valuable for anyone to play with. Affliction Warlock, Boomies, still king of casters. Frost Decay, still the king of melees. And Stability Rogue, still the king of RBGs, because you still need a rogue in your group, and Stability is just that much better. And then you have Mistweaver Monks and Disc Priest being the best healers with your Preservation Evoker. So, thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you. Again, thank you for all the support and love that I got from the previous days. It's amazing, and I can't thank you guys enough. Again, if you want to subscribe to the channel, please do. If you want to like the video, please like the video. And if you want to comment below what you think about the tier list, please let me know, and I will respond as quickly as I can. Again, thank you. Have a great day. Bye.